Alrighty. So, hello everybody. I'm here to, in a sense, explain to you kind of how I went about creating my story map for this art history course and the last art history course that I took. So here we see the first story map that I made and things my sophomore year, specifically over Stela 34 at El Peruaca in Guatemala. So one of the first things that you kind of want to do when making your story map is, just being able, finding the piece that you want to go over. So for me, I just kind of browsed the internet, looked at some books, and tried to find something that was like, okay, that's interesting. That's what I want to do. And so I had found this somewhat discussed stela from the Maya region. And so I chose to do this one because there's a lot of material to work with here. You could do the iconography of the person in the middle here. You also including this person here. You could also do sort of an analysis of, how these words reflect or work with what's going on sort of in this image. So from there, what you want to do is scroll all the way down here. Sorry, it's a long one. You then want to cite, and then you also want to take and annotate, so that way you kind of know when you're coming back to these sources, when you're working on it, it's like, okay, this is why I chose this one, and it's got these specific materials in it. And it's okay if you have some that you don't end up using. It's always good to have extra just in case. So from there, specifically with this one, it was converted from an actual essay that we had written. So it's a little denser than most others. So you want to kind of figure out, okay, where's the starting point? So for me, I started with, what was this used for when it was built, when it was constructed. So that's what I kind of start with the introduction is, okay, so this is in the plaza, most likely in front of one of these, giant temple buildings. And then, okay, it's also most likely, much taller than it is now because it's missing this section here. So it's like explaining that, okay, there used to be this section here too that's just this like giant earth monster that she's standing on top of. And then from there, to kind of give everybody a sense of, kind of like, okay, where is the site at? You can go ahead and include a map. So like right here is about where El Peruaca is located. So it's, nice to kind of, get your, audience's attention, like, okay, this is the region where we're looking at, and kind of like, oh, so there's all these other sites that are kind of around here, so they kind of know where the context is of this this piece. From there, for this one, then use your sources to then start examining it, and you can even from an art history perspective, or even just an art perspective, you can analyze, okay, what's it made out of? What's the material? What were the tools that were probably used to create this? Kind of what can we take away from that, and then use that information to kind of further what the meaning is behind a lot of these things. So that's what's kind of going on here next. And then after we kind of analyze kind of just those more surface art things, then we really start getting into, okay, what is the iconography? What are they being, what is the intention of this? So that's what we're kind of seeing here is, and it's really nice on ArcGIS because I can take my picture and then I can zoom in on it. So I can really get my audience's attention, like, okay, we're talking about this headdress here. And things. And then these buttons are really nice because I could include, so like if I click on this, let it load, I can include like, okay, here is, all these these glyphs and things from the Maya text and stuff that I'm using to kind of pick apart what's being displayed in this headdress and like her necklace area and things. So like if we go back in here, so it's like talking about this, and then this headdress here is kind of what this is sort of including, is all that stuff that it would start to make this feel a little too extra if all that was included in here. So these buttons are a really nice feature, and I could show you how to do that here in just a second. And then, you know, now we can take and then zoom to a different area. And again, you'd still be able to click on this button thing over here. And then still looking further, and then we sort of get into, okay, so what does all this stuff mean? So we've looked at, you know, what's the material, what were the tools used, what does the iconography mean, and then what does this mean in relation to why was it constructed? Why, you know, why was it constructed? Why was it moved? And all that stuff. Specifically, this piece was moved by later inhabitants to where it was eventually found. So that's what we kind of finish off with here, and sort of putting it back into its original context from what we can now extrapolate from it. So yeah, and then here's sort of just the original context of it. So now if I'm able to click on the one I'm currently working on, so this is the one I'm currently working on for this class, which is Stela C from Traces Apotes. And so I'll sort of break it. So this is a very rough draft of what my story map looks like. So it's like here, I've got my title and then kind of what I'm focusing on in this story map. So the cross influence between the Epi-Olmec and the pre-classic Highland and Piedmont Maya, and how that shaped the classic Maya culture and sort of their worldview. A lot to discuss in a story map. So, so here we have the buttons. And so if I, just to kind of show you how we do this, if I click on the add the content, I can click on button. I can then type in my own text here. So it's like, here I typed in the Traces Apotes Museum, because that's what the web address that goes into this little area here will take me to. So if I click on that and then that, it'll take me to the actual museum site. And this is in Spanish, but you can, of course, translate it into English using the magic of the internet. And so from there, it's kind of similar to how you do outlines for your essays and stuff. Do that with your story map. So kind of put like, okay, so here's my introduction, and then kind of just include some things that you really want to be able to mention, you know, so you don't forget to put those in there. So like here, it's like include the time period of the piece, you know, being 31 BC, and how that relates to, you know, the time period or the culture that we're talking about. And then for mine, I'm also including the earliest Maya date, which is 36 BC. So like huge difference in when these numbers are being used. And then to kind of give my class sort of a sense of location, again, we're using the map, but now we can use a feature where if I keep scrolling, now it zooms in and shows like, oh, here's the exact site location. And then here it is in relation to sort of like the bigger scale of Mexico and the Yucatan and the Gulf of Mexico. And then over here, I'll of course include some images of the site. Just haven't put those in yet. Then continuing down, I really like these separators to sort of, you know, tell your audience like, oh, hey, you're on to something else. You know, we're on to a new section of information. So it's like we went from discussing the site of Traces Apotes to now we're discussing a very specific thing from that site. So like for me, it's Stela C, which if we scroll all the way back up top, this is a very crude picture of the Stela, but that's what we're talking about. So we'll analyze, you know, what I'm, you know, doing here is saying, okay, I'm going to analyze it. You know, I'm going to analyze, you know, what's being depicted, you know, what's the material, and really getting into that. And then sort of mentioning the intentional break that we can see that occurred along the axis mundi, which won't concern you right now, unless you want to hear me talk about this. And then the next one, I'll analyze the back of it. So the image over here can be, you know, the back of it. And that's what's really nice about this sidecar feature, is that you can have your text and people can also be seeing what you're talking about at the same time. So it's a really nice feature that these story maps include. And then, some more information about what I don't want to forget to discuss. Again, with the separator, really nice feature. And then sort of getting into my conclusion here is being able to compare this to the Izapa Maya style, very early pre-classic Maya site in the Piedmont Highland Zone. And then comparing that to the back of it to the script and numbers used by those early peoples. And then again, I really like these buttons. I've used them in everything. And then sort of now here's the final conclusion, taking all the information, wrapping it into one big ball of like, okay, the last sentence or the last little statement of my, introduction, where it's like, how did this influence the classic Maya, and making that the last bit. So to kind of structure it, it's like, think about what your, little abstract single sentence is at the top of your story map, and make that structure your story map. So it's like, I started with the Epiolmec, and then I went into Izapa, and now I'm finishing with, okay, how did those two sites influence each other to make the classic Maya? And then include your bibliography, as always. So yeah,